This is the Wade Borth Podcast, where smart ideas spark new opportunities. If you're ready to see money in a whole new way and build a life on your terms, you're in the right place.
Hello, and welcome back to the Wade Borth Podcast. Today, I have a special guest with me today. This is somebody I met. I've known of Suzanne for quite a while, just through was her husband, Brent White, who's been on my podcast before, and I've heard him talk about her so much that I actually thought that I knew her. And we actually had a chance to sit and meet, and it was a great little barbecue spot down in Dallas, Texas. I don't know if you remember that, Suzanne.
I do.
Yeah, it was our first time to actually meet face to face, I believe. Unless maybe there's another time, but I think that's one of the first time we met face to face. And Brent even suggested maybe we have you on as a podcast because you have a certain set of skills that we don't often talk about. And quite frankly, I think it gets overlooked. And there's some real benefits to having people do what you do. So we're going to get into it today talking about what is it that you do, and more importantly, the thing that you do, how does that serve clients or people that are in my sphere and quite frankly in your sphere. So I'm excited today to talk to Suzanne White, and we're going to talk about the exciting world of property and casualty insurance. And maybe more specifically, business property and casualty insurance. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say. Commercial. Yep. Commercial.
Yes, commercial. Thank you so much. I'll learn the lingo someday. I'll get there. So again, welcome. Thank you so much. And again, it's funny, Suzanne, maybe just take a moment to introduce yourself to the listeners. Tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of what brought you to where you're at, because I imagine that some people, I know like for myself, life insurance and what we do with infinite banking and all the benefits of whole life insurance it's almost a calling to me because I lived through some things in my life that were like very, very high emotional, and it was stressful for my family because of lack of insurance and some different things that happened in my life, kind of like how can I make an impact in people's lives? And that kind of drew me to my industry. I'm just curious about what drew you to where you're at, and kind of tell me a little bit about your story. I'm excited to hear that.
Absolutely. So I guess I'm lucky. My father growing up had a P&C agency. He did personal lines for the town that I grew up in. I mean, everybody came to him. And as things progressed in the early 90s, his company required him to sell life insurance. And so I would make the appointments for him because unlike home and auto insurance, where it's required a lot of the time by law or by your lender, making those appointments, really, it was a really good learning experience for me. And I would get the newspaper every Sunday, the Dallas Times, the Fort Worth paper as well. And I would look for life events like weddings, baby announcements, engagements. And I would go to a phone and dial 1411 and you would get 2 free numbers at a payphone. So I'd stand at a payphone with my list, write down those numbers, and then go back, and I had a little filing system that I would call through. And if they said, oh, not now, I'd say, can I call you back in 30 days? And call back with something, whether it was, did you get your plumbing issue fixed or whatever we had talked about that was the reason he couldn't talk to me then. So that was a really neat learning experience. I said to myself, my mom was a teacher and my dad was in insurance. I said, I will never be either. And I became both. Isn't that how it goes? And so in a job, I was looking, as my kids had gotten a little older, and I was looking for a career, and we'll just say I tripped and fell into an insurance agency in Grapevine, Texas, and kind of worked my way up to the commercial division there and enjoyed it, and ended up getting recruited out by Arthur J. Gallagher. And that's when I really learned about large commercial workflows, best practices in the industry, how to keep yourself out of an E&O by documentation and putting everything in your management system. And then went to the largest independent in Texas. And that was a great experience. I got to learn a lot of different industries within insurance and be on different teams. And I just decided there's got to be more. And I kind of looked around and I'm like, okay, who is 10, 20 years older than me sitting on the same floor doing what I'm doing? And there's nowhere else to go in that account management seat. And so Brent said, hey, why don't you just open your own agency? And I'm like, okay. So we actually opened our own agency with the focus of being bought out by a financial company. And it took about 8 months. We were bought out. and moved over and started our insurance practice for it. I think at that time they were the 14th largest CPA firm here in Dallas. Worked there for a few years, and that's where we really saw what the potential could be if you holistically took care of a client. Not just, hey, I'm going to quote your property and casualty, but I really don't know, and a lot of times agents don't care if their client does have life insurance or what they're involved in financially. But believe me, it is important, because if that client is sued or something goes wrong, they're not going to have money to pay you anyway, right? So I think if you go to the doctor for a cough, you don't want them looking at another part of your body or saying, are you eating well, or something that doesn't relate. So when you can relate the holistic, like you do the body, like a doctor does, looking at all the symptoms and what could cause it, in the financial realm, that's what we decided to do. And working at the CPA, there were multiple different divisions of different things that advisors did. And we realized a business owner can have up to 6 to 7 different advisors that, number one, they're having to give all their information to, and it's very redundant. Filling out the same applications, putting your your address in, your phone number, all of those things, all of your financials. And we thought it's got to be easier. And sitting here in Dallas through COVID, we saw so many businesses going out of business. And the one thing that didn't change was their property and casualty. Maybe, whoever they were leasing their space from said, we'll give you a price break and tack on maybe 6 months at the end of your lease. But for property and casualty, if the agent wasn't active, went out and said, okay, let's lessen your work comp because people can't come into work, or you don't have, now you're delivering all of your food or beverages, and really try to work with them, that didn't give them a break. So I think working holistically, like you said, infinite banking, there's so many strategies that business owners can use their dollar, not for just one thing, but for multiple purposes, but also to always have that nest egg there, whether they need to buy another piece of equipment to get on a job, or if they need to sustain when income and environmental changes happen.
To your point, thank you for sharing. You just brought up so many things. I was actually taking notes because you made me think of a couple of things that we really want to talk about. But as awful as COVID was, and as disruptive as it was in our lives, think about the lessons we learned from COVID. Think about the lessons we can take going forward from COVID. How valuable is liquidity? How valuable is cash?
So valuable.
One of the things that we talk about in one of our Factum Foundation presentations is that, prior to COVID, the average days of liquidity for small business was 28 days. 28 days between, an event happening and then being shut down. That is so tiny. And so we teach from that standpoint. And this is why I think it's so valuable for us to be having this conversation. We teach the difference between chaos and opportunity is typically liquidity. And if you have liquidity, it becomes an opportunity. If you don't have liquidity, it becomes chaos or this event in your life that will really disrupt you. So I think you're hitting the nail on the head is what are we doing to help, build a team together? And one of the things that we love, here at our organization is that we talk about the base of the financial pyramid, right? So we start with, do you have a liquidity in place? Do you have property and casualty? I'm sure you got bunches of stories of people that were not doing a good job of being good stewards or good leaders in their business. Not maybe because they didn't even know, but we have a story of a gentleman who didn't have his rental properties properly insured and they burnt down. He said he lost 10 years worth of revenue. All the revenue that he gained over the last 10 years, he lost because he wasn't doing a good job of keeping them insured at the proper level that they were, valued at. So I guess my whole point to that story is what you do, what I do, and really what a bunch of your financial team does is so important to bring them together. And what tools do we have now to make them all work in sequence? And I think that's where I get excited about what you guys are doing. You guys have a great process to say, hey, there's a lot of things we probably have to address, but let's gather information, let's put it in a model so we can understand this and we have a framework to have a discussion around versus everybody living in their own fiefdom, right? It's like this idea of I'm going to live in my world says the P&C person. I'm gonna live in my world, says the life insurance
Right.
guy, and I'm gonna live in my world, says the attorney. Why can't we, if we truly want to serve the client, why aren't we doing it all together? And do we have a framework to make that happen?
Absolutely. I so agree. I remember when I worked at one property and casualty agency and I wanted to get life insurance. So I walked to one of the partners and I said, "Hey, who sells life insurance here?" And they said, "Oh, no, we don't do that." I'm like, what? Of all of these business owners and high value net worth clients that we did their personal lines, we did employee benefits, 401k, but we don't offer life insurance. And that blew my mind. And I really feel like up until now, and my husband, Brent White, he created a software that puts everybody together and everybody can play well in the sandbox together, which we've all in our different, respected careers and what we do, referral sources usually they end up one-sided. Everything's great, but usually it's one person that's really referring a lot of business, but it's not always reciprocated. Because it's hard for me as a property and casualty person to refer my clients out to another specialty. Number one, I fear that I might not be referring them to someone that's going to do a good job, and that's going to reflect poorly on me. Even like my brother's a roofer. I have to think big and hard before, even if one of my clients has a claim. If I want to put my reputation on the line, you just never know. Some people just aren't happy with anything, but that could potentially affect my reputation or what we're trying to do here. So what's great about the software is we can bring any financial advisor that's working and that's directing a business owner in their whole plan. We can bring them onto one model is what we call it, and everybody can work together. And what I love about that is it's absolute transparency. There are so many times that we'll be looking at employee benefits, we'll be looking at 401k, and those advisors have hidden fees within those plans. I'm not saying everybody does that, but also are they showing the best coverage of what the client needs at the lowest price, or are they just showing a price that's right below what they're paying? So of course they're going to move. So that transparency, when somebody's on the model, I can go look and see, are there hidden fees? We're not doing any of that because we're trying to capture everything we can to be able to use that to fund the vehicle that can get them the freedom that you were talking about and that liquidity.
Yeah, I think, that's when I look at it is like what makes us easier for us to be, at our firm, we're very abundant mindset. I know, quite frankly, I don't want to do the job that you've been doing since you were in your dad's office. Now, you're using a payphone, so I'm not going to date you, but I'm thinking like, when was the last time I actually used a payphone? So thank you for that. Vince. But I don't want to be that. I don't want to be the expert that you're the expert in. Quite frankly, I think where the real gift come is I can take my passion, my expertise, bring it to you guys, and we can find out how do we work this together. Again, in the ultimate servitude of our client. Because again, people have, it always feels like a territorial battle. Like everybody wants to be like, I'm going to lead this charge. Well, in all reality, if we're doing our job right, it's not to lead the charge for our client, it's to empower our client to lead their own charge. They need to be the director of their own movie. And all our job is to provide them the tools to be able to be well armed and be well educated on how to use it. And I think that's the difference of of our relationship is like, I see you guys, you've put together a tremendous tool. I see like a great opportunity looking at what you guys are doing, and specifically with you, your conversations, we were talking about some conversation when I was down in Dallas at that barbecue joint, which was fabulous, by the way.
It was good.
The ribs and they had the combination platter, but anyhow, I can talk
They did
food all day.
Vaquero. It was Vaquero.
Vaquero. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and they had all those, but anyhow, it was so good. But yes, that's beside the point. But the point is like, coming together. And then some of the things you were saying at that meeting was how just simple things that I would never even think of. Although I've been in the insurance business, the quote unquote insurance business for 35 plus years. but I haven't been in the property casualty. And more importantly, I haven't been in the commercial space. Every specialty has their nuances and their special sauce, if we want to call it that. And so I don't want to learn all the special sauce that you have to figure out. That's your job. If we can come together, think how powerful we can become for our client to empower them to move where they want to move.
Absolutely.
One of the things you brought up was this idea of commercial insurance. If clients are, and you'll have to help me because again, I'm still pretty slow in your world. So I'm going to throw it out there and I'll let you kind of take it from here.
Okay.
But this idea of like, hey, I'm going to pay a premium if I'm in the construction world, for example, which is probably one of your guys' niches. I know it's really, you love the construction world. If I'm paying a commercial line premium, I have two ways of paying for it. I can either pay for it all out of my pocket or I can finance it. But if I pay for it all out of my pocket, there's no refunds. So if something happens or whatever. And then the other side is, I can finance it. Well, are they knowingly financing, or are they financing not knowing what the cost is? And all of a sudden you kind of find out the rates that they're paying are enormous. And so their abilities to kind of recapture some of those unknowingly spent dollars, and which I think is probably the point where we'd like to get into a little bit, is like, how can we avoid that spending money unknowingly or unnecessarily when there's other alternatives? And if we can bring those in, it doesn't have any net effect on the client, or has a positive net effect on the client, that's really what the win-win is.
Absolutely. You explained that perfectly. So yes, in
Thank
the
you.
property and casualty world, basically, to narrow it down, there's two types of policies. You have your standard policy, which is like your home and auto, that you have your annual premium or 6-month premium, and they're going to divide that out over 6 months that you pay the insurance company, that monthly premium. And then we have our non-standard, or what I like to call weird. These are our weird coverages. These are things like when you drive by a big crane, and big construction, or professional liability that all lawyers, doctors, anyone with a professional license has to carry. Those are the weirder coverages that in that market, it's the non-standard market. So I'm here in Texas. The standard coverages, your home auto, business owner policies with Hartford, Travelers, those are all standard policies that are governed by TDI, Texas Department of Insurance. Then you have your non-standard policies. Most of those are coming out of, you've heard of Lloyd's of London. Lloyd's of London, they're coming out of London or out of a non-standard market. That simply means that I have to go through a broker like Amwins, CRC, AmTrust in some of theirs. I have to go through a broker and submit all the information. The broker plays telephone. So I'm asking, get me this policy. He's going to the insuring company. Then they come back. He's like, I need this, because I can't deal with them directly. So there's extra taxes and fees added on to that type of policy, the weird big policies. And then on top of that, you have it's a minimum earned amount. Usually it's between 25 and 35%, which means I'm going to bind that policy, and that day, no matter what happens, at least 35% of that policy, I'm not going to get back if I cancel it. So if I bind a big policy and the next day I'm like, oh, I changed my mind, I don't need it, I'm still on the hook for 35% of that policy. Plus, they want it fully earned, meaning they want it all up front. So I've sold a few, more than a few $1 million policies, especially in the real estate realm, when we're adding on a bunch of apartment complexes and high rises.
When you say $1 million policies, you're talking $1 million of premium, right?
Yes. $1 million in
I just wanna
premium.
make sure.
Large
Okay.
property, exactly. So that's all due when we bind coverage. 25% of that's due if they all burn down and the guy's like, I want to cancel my policy. So what these business owners do is they opt to do a premium finance. So there's premium finance companies just for insurance, property and casualty insurance. I know in the life insurance side, premium finance is a bit different and is very different. On the property and casualty side, basically what they're doing is they're charging an APR between the lowest I've seen lately is 13%, going all the way up to 25 to 28% on loaning the remainder of the amount after the down payment. The down payment is typically around 35%.
Okay. Can
So,
I stop you right there just so I can get
yes,
panel on the numbers?
yes,
So you just threw
yes,
out a lot of stuff there. I want to make sure everybody that's listening and watching YouTube understands this. So again, so I can understand it more than anybody else. So what
yes,
you're
please.
saying is, let's say you have somebody that's in real estate, owns some apartment buildings. This is not
Right.
that unusual in our marketplace. We have real estate professionals, but
Yes,
they own a piece of real estate. Their commercial line of insurance might be $1 million in premiums because
yes,
they have tens of millions of dollars to protect, right?
yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
And this is liability. This is, all disasters that can happen, right? So it's covering everything. But so they have $1 million that's due in premiums. And they know they need it. Quite frankly, they can't get away because somebody's going to require that they protect that asset, the banker or whoever's doing the financing. So what you're saying is that they would typically have to come in with $350,000 of their own money,
Hmm.
and pay for that, in essence, a down payment on this, and then the other $750,000 is financed at say anywhere between 15 and 25%.
Yes.
And they do this knowing that's what the rate is. Or do they just say what's the monthly and then they move along?
Well, they beat me up over the premium. I go back, we do everything that we can. And then at the end, it's just a big nosedive because it's like, okay, do you want to pay up front or do you want to premium finance? Or like, I want to premium finance. They don't even look at the APR because they want to keep that money liquid in their pocket, right?
So their cost of being liquid's costing them 25%.
Exactly. On top of that it starts again every year. They have to do it again. They don't get anything back from it if they didn't have a claim. So when we're able to keep them more liquid, like you were talking about, now we can raise deductibles or retentions and start chipping away at trying to get that premium lower by them more self-insuring because they do know if they had a disaster, they have the money to put down on the retention or the deductible. But if they don't, then they win that year. Also, it keeps my clients from filing frivolous claims. Right now, coming out of COVID, as everyone can see just on your home and auto, every rate has gone up. I think people just forgot to drive coming out of COVID. And there were so many accidents, which really, really increased rates and had insuring companies tightening up, not renewing, or if we're late on a payment, they might have canceled you. So that goes all the way across the board on the rate.
I'm just going to kind of restate that because it's so important. I think everybody needs to hear this too. Is like, so you guys, your plan, and this is why I love what you guys are doing. You're making such an impact I still consider these all pretty much small business owners, right? Mid-sized business
Yes,
owners, small.
mid-size.
And what you're trying to do is help them understand it's through education and awareness. That's the
Hmm.
foundation of what we talk about. Education awareness, like, okay, you realize that you're premium financing this, you don't really care what the APR because you have to pay it and you typically probably aren't going to have the cash. You really don't have any choice. You're forced to pay unless you have
You're
access to $1
forced.
million that you want to float out. But that could be very costly if you spend
Right.
that money. It could be a tremendous opportunity cost because if you had the ability to buy something else for that extra $750,000, what could that, so there's a cost to that. And then so the idea is if you can help them understand that and say, okay, how can we start reserving some dollars, start storing some dollars so that we can start taking control of that. And this is where I think we have the common interest here is like, I
Yes,
know that storing money in a properly structured whole life insurance policy can bring tremendous value, a tremendous
tremendous.
value. We call it the 8 benefits of that, but there's a huge value there from the privacy, from the protection, from the certainty, from all these other things we're talking about. And then if there is a claim, you can say, hey, let me go borrow money from my policy to pay that claim. Or, hey, I'm going to finance it to my company now, and I can charge my company the same rate that this other company charging it, say 25%, because I was willing to pay it before. So why would I pay it back to my policy at that same rate? So there's a lot of benefits to kind of doing what we do with doing what you do. But the first part of it starts with having somebody that understands how to how to manage, I'm going to call it manage, or be a good leader in the commercial space, in the property and casualty space.
Absolutely. Yes. And I think when you couple a team, like we have a team of 7 advisors, they all have doors here in our office. We bring them in to each case. And so our business owners were getting a full team that everybody is a specialist in their area. If somebody hands you a business card and it says home and auto, 401k, benefits, voluntary benefits, oh, I do disability, oh, and I do commercial insurance. Someone hands you a card, you know what? It's taken me a lifetime to be an expert in what I do. I focus on it very seriously. I keep myself educated. I know what's going on in Austin, here in Texas, and laws and things being pushed through. I could not focus on another specialty and call myself a specialist. I'm going to stick in my lane. Yes, I might be able to make more money by casting a wider net, but also I'm going to fail that client at some point just because I can't keep on top of it all. I know I had 2 kids and I lost one of them a bunch. Once you got that second one, I wasn't a specialist at being a mom anymore. There's only so much you can handle and that you're used to handling, right? And that you can be good at. And I think that we can't all be specialists in every area. So that's why we bring in other advisors. Now, I know that you're going to do the best job you can for this client, and we're working together. One of the best things about our software is that we made a super application. So the business owner only has to fill out one application as we're coming in, to gather all the information, because work comp, 401k, their employee benefits, we all need the same exact information. Why fill it out 3 times when we can do it once?
That maybe doesn't sound like a lot, but I think it's huge, right? So again,
Well, if you've ever been to the doctor, yeah, and you've had to fill out the same information on 15 different forms, and you're like, somebody should organize this to save everybody frustration and time. You already know where I live. You already know my full name, my date of birth. Why isn't there one form I need to fill out and be done? And so we found the same thing, because insurance can be archaic in areas. And so trying to really have a heart for the business owner, know that they're busy, that person having a one-line road into all of their business, everything going on, and to have this group, your team of people, meet with you twice a year or each year to make sure you're on track for your exit. We call it your exit strategy, your estate plan. That takes so much off of them, because you're good at being a plumber. You may not be good at taxes or good at knowing how you should structure your business or what your options are if you're deciding to, you've got a partner and you guys, you're older, you're going to exit the business earlier. How is that going to happen? So just having all that information as we move forward, that takes that off of that business owner having to be an expert or find an expert in every area.
Yeah, or taxing their staff. So a lot of times these small businesses are like, hey, I got a small staff. And again, I'm with you. I was actually saw a commercial yesterday or 2 days ago on TV. It was like live, home, auto. I'm like, so in other words, what you're telling me is that I want a focused professional, right? If I go in for brain surgery, I don't want a guy that's a general practitioner going, I think this is how this is connected, right? They're guessing because they're not in their profession. I actually, it's one of the reasons I dropped my securities license. I used to have a securities license. And I see it all the time in our industry. I'm like, I don't want to focus on it. It takes away my focus of doing the thing that I love and that I have a passion for, which is, how do we educate and place whole life insurance policies with people so I can bring in the biggest benefit? That's my focus. That's all I want to do. Again, I'm bright enough and I've been around the industry enough to be able to talk a little bit of the language, but I never want to give advice around that part anymore. Just like property and casualty conversations or health insurance conversations or Medicare conversations. Bless those people for doing what they do, because that is a special gift. They work awful hard. And I'm glad they're there because I don't have to do it then.
Exactly.
Because again, if we all look at this and we can bring our skills together, much stronger together.
And we see this as a ministry for the business owner coming out of COVID. I know I touched on that. just seeing how people were having to make decisions on their baby, what they had grown, and having to lop off parts of it, or, worse, just close their doors, and how that could affect their family legacy down the road, or how many people they could have given a job to improve their families. And I think it's a tenfold reward when we do what's right and help that person. Because, I heard someone talking the other day, they said, oh, I was trying to do a hole-in-one event for a golf tournament. I think it was Brent telling me this. And he said, I kid you not, 15 different insurance agencies, just, I guess, out of the phone book at that time. And he said, not one of them could insure it. So a lot of people, they don't know better. They may go to their neighborhood person that does really well in home and auto and does a little bit of business. But that's usually a captive, where our agency, I have access to unlimited carriers, unlimited regional carriers, depending on where someone's located, to find and have a bit of competition to make sure that we're offering the best price, the best coverage, and the best education to that client. And I want the business owner or the comptroller, whoever's in charge of, setting up their risk program, I want them to be educated enough to know exactly what they're getting, why they're getting it, and why they're paying for it, and not pay a dollar over the coverage that they need. And that's, in my part, really important, because there's a lot of policies that I'll get to quote, and maybe the agent, or there was an agent really actively involved in getting the business the first year, but now we're 5 years along, and this, obviously, the business has acquired more assets, more property, whether it's personal property or trucks, equipment, and they may even be offering something different. I know you see roofing companies and you're like, oh, well, they do gutters too, and they do turf, and and they paint, and light construction, maybe.
And they.
Yes. Well, if I'm not actively talking to that client, and they know, that no matter what they do, if they add or take anything away, give me a call, because I'm going to need to add that class. Because if it's not added on, it's not covered. So a lot of agents, especially if there's automatic renewals in the standard market, like our home and auto policies, they don't look at those as carefully because they just automatically renew. Now, on my weird big policies, I have to submit an application. I have to submit actual revenues, payroll, everything every year. We have to almost start from scratch. So I'm always on top of those. But a lot of agents may not, and it may not be a huge premium, so they're not overly focused on it. So that's something we really aim to do, is coming back together every year and making sure, are you adding anything else? Are you adding any locations? Have you added more staff? All of those questions to make sure that the policy is growing with the business and didn't start out as the baby start policy.
Yeah. That's interesting part about our conversations. People will look at kind of what you do, what I do, and they go, how does that make me money? I think naturally business people look at it that way.
Of course.
And my response a lot of time is, my job, because again, I talk about liquidity, and it can be, sometimes it's not the most exciting. I think it's very exciting, but some people don't want to look at that. They're like, I want to talk about how to grow my business, investments, whatever it is. But, we talk about this idea of path of money, and what my passion is, I'm not going to tell you or anybody else out there what it is that is going to make you the most money, is going to make you like have that abundance in all those areas of life. That's kind of unique to you. You need to figure that out. My job is to keep you from going poor.
That's it.
I see yours the same way. It's like, again, the story of the client who had lost 10 years worth of revenue because he didn't have the proper insurance. I mean, how crazy is that? How easy would that have been to fix, right? There's just so many stories I see and hear about that our job isn't to find you the next greatest investment or whatever it is. Our job is to think, proactively, like, what are the potholes that are in front of you that you don't see, that we can help protect you, because we know from history that they will happen to some people along the way. Our job is to keep you from going poor. Thank you for listening to the first half of the conversation with Suzanne White. In there, where we talked about how collaboration and working together empowers you with the client on how to take control of that part of your business that can cost you a lot of money. I invite you to listen to the part 2 of the conversation where we talk about how her expertise and how we bring together the use of whole life insurance can now put you in a position of managing your money. So thank you so much for listening to the first half, and look forward to having you show up for the second half of the conversation.
I appreciate you spending some time with me. Change starts with understanding, and action builds the future. We'll catch you on the next episode.